welcome to episode 12 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. This episode opens with a reading by Chaucer Cameron from her recent book, In an Ideal World, I'd Not Be Murdered. Then we have new poems from Eva Wal, Lynne Hjelmgaard, Nora Hughes, Roach, and Trish Broomfield. Finally, Paul Wren talks about poetry and science and his own poetry journey. Chaucer Cameron sometimes prefaces her readings with a sensitivity warning. Her subject is prostitution, and her poetry is exciting and challenging because, not although, it may jolt readers or listeners out of their comfort zone.
Hi, my name is Chaucer Cameron, and I'm going to be reading a selection of poems from my pamphlet, In an Ideal World, I'd Not Be Murdered, which was published by Against the Grain in 2021. The book is part memoir, part fiction, and the poems explore the impact of prostitution. 1-8 Farley Road. I find him at the bottom of the stairs. The strange thing is, his eyes are blue with flecks of grey. I could have sworn they were brown, a dull sort of brown, but then again the mask, which often hid his eyes and always hid his face. Apart from one time, years ago, when I caught him naked and alone. Now, in death, that face looks so serene, clean almost. I'd often worried that the rubber marks on his jawline, forehead, and just beneath his eyes would pit his skin so deep he'd be scarred for life. But here we are, just he and I, gazing at each other, the way dead people do when caught together, intimately. One thing troubles me. I say this in a whisper, so not to disturb the dust that's gathered. How did this come to be? This flat, these walls. They're crawling with dead girls. I know the rules. No names, no dates, just numbers. Hooked. I remember standing on a street corner eating BLT on rye, thinking about my fluid intake. But despite my thirst, despite taboo, I aimed for the 3 crowns. Ordered fruit juice. Nearly. It was an ordinary evening, drear, overcast. Outside the traffic was building. Diesel fumes circled the inside of my nostrils. Air. I needed it. Exited. Or tried to. It was raining, so I called a cab, considered my options, bent at the edges. The traffic was static. The traffic eased. The traffic was at a standstill. The traffic flowed nicely. The taxi turned right, past Clissold Park, to... It had been a long time since I'd been in that part of the city. I remember how quickly evenings turned dark, how my cigarette slid between seats, how my fingers, not as slim, not as deft as they once were, reached deep into the crease, deep down, hooked. Cartoons. It's funny what you think of when you've had a near miss. I don't think my nose is broken. Could have been much worse. No time to check it out. It doesn't hurt. Anyway, it's funny what you think of when you're gagging for your life, when you hear the car doors click, when the music is turned up and you put on your disguise. Tonight it was the Flintstones. I watched them as a kid. You can watch it on YouTube. It's a sort of animation. They used to call them cartoons, but I can't tell the difference. The Flintstones were a family. There was Fred and Barney, Wilma and Betty. I had a crush on Betty. What a beauty. Lovely legs. She was a real animation. Fred and Wilma had a kid. Every family had a kid. Named their daughter Pebbles. Oh, there was a Bam Bam. I'm forgetting Bam Bam. They found him on the doorstep, then took him in. I loved that show. I loved the way they loved their kids. It's funny what you think of when you've got a dodgy punter. Bloody Flintstones. Bloody Pebbles. Hell, a broken nose. King's Cross Cafe 1. Crystal would always talk about her body. A body bought and sold ages so much faster, as if it wasn't real. Wounds, scars, than the general population. She'd often throw in random facts, like that. This next poem is the longest poem in the book, and it's called Introductions. Night, a dimly lit street, an almost empty cafe. Dull bland interior, brown wooden chairs, a brown leather sofa, a dark brown tub chair in the corner. A male waiter with scraggy straight back hair stands behind the counter. Crystal is sitting by the window of the cafe while another woman sits on the floor at her feet. A young woman lies asleep, slumped on a broken, battered beanbag at the back of the room. She has covered up her legs with an ochre cardigan. "That is Jane," said Crystal, pointing towards the sleeping woman. Jane, not Jane with a Y or even plain Jane, but Jane. Oh, for God's sake, talk about making life hard. Crystal lights a cigarette. "Jane Foster," she calls herself. "Look, she's even got it tattooed on her knuckles." "I had a daughter once. She was fostered. Well, she was for a while. I was only allowed to see her on Saturdays, and then I found out some oh-so-nice adoptive family got her. She's not fostered, she's adopted, and her name is anyone's guess. Anonymous. Anonymous. It won't be the name I gave her, though, will it? They won't tell me what it is, a name I mean. I'll never know what they chose until she's old enough to find me, if she even bothers, will I? And then I'll have to wait, and even then, she'll still be anonymous. Barely there. Anyway, there she is. That's Jane Foster. Jane. Crystal gets up, stretches, and orders a coffee just for herself. You weren't here when she turned up last week, were you? She was in a right state, told us some story that she'd sort of had a baby, a miscarriage, abortion, can't remember which. Whatever, the fetus ended up in the dustbin. Is that a criminal offence? I mean, if it's flushed down the toilet, no one would be any the wiser, would they? Just a cramp or two, a bleed, a full stop. It's not that hard to flush a fetus down the loo unless you listen to that claptrap from the pro-life lot, the ones that make you feel like shit. They stand there with their banners, with their slimy little posters, and the way they call them babies, little people, small humans, beating hearts. And yeah, I guess. How could you really flush a little beating heart down the toilet and not commit suicide when you can't live with the flashbacks?
Details about Chaucer's pamphlet can be found at poetryworthhearing.biz. You can also find a link to her own website, which includes some of her work as a filmmaker. And now we have 4 poems by the German poet and artist Eva Wal. The English text can be found on poetryworthhearing.biz, along with a link to Eva's website, where she has posted the German texts. This sequence has the title Poems from the Unbroken Forest.
Visit. You may enter here on tiptoe. Please leave your luggage and your litter. Carry only what is you. Put your bare feet down, tender and firm. Like a lover, caress the ground. Touch, walk. You will step on my ancestors that hold my roots tangled in memories. I move slow. Twigs and leaves speak through me so you understand. This is your first lesson with me. Listen. You may now touch my bark. Rub your back against it like a bear. Not too hungry, not too weary. Yearning for this experience. Breathe in. Breathe out. Take your time before you leave my realm. A memory of you may stay with me for a while. The plunge. A river runs, a canopy rustles, a skunk appears, a raccoon clings to the branch of a cedar, a spider weaves, a cocoon opens. A beetle sways on a birch leaf in the morning mist and falls onto old trees' mulch. You take the plunge. Run, rustle, appear, cling, weave, open, sway, fall. Step onto a new path into a new age. Keep moving at steady speed. Keep moving. Breathe with me. Call me a tree, where spirits are summoned in the forest. Balsam or pine, maple, ash, birch too is fine, as long as your look is clear in the forest. Let us commune and let us commute. I am canopy and I am root. Whisper and chant is my home in the forest. Feel my colours glow, wandering in the flow of time-woven beats in the forest. Waterfall. On top of a glacier, imagine a river. Fall quiet, quiet. A ravenous river into the wild. You are the embryo evolving from this moment in rainbow-covered space. A glass edge, crisscross cut, splits water-covered rock from sky. Both fall into silence, transforming roaring matter into oblivion.
Do take a look at Eva's website. It's full of riches. Our next poet is Lynne Hjelmgaard with 2 poems.
I'd like to speak of this memory, of hummingbirds, long ago fragrances, coconut and fig, fluttering wings next to a hot, hot wooden deck underfoot, and trade winds blowing up the night, throwing our ship about, taut lines stretched to the limit and released, thrill of the wind working its way through every inch of the rigging, no mercy, but to take over and blow, take over and blow. Heading east, in the shipping lanes of the straits, which even then, more than 20 years ago, were a graveyard for Africa, we, in our ignorance, sailed happily for Spain, our children peering up from the cabin at headlands, snow-capped mountains of Morocco, asking how much longer, mostly content to return to a book or stare blankly at the water, doze. Their questions echoed my loneliness, longing for certainty, land, stalls of fresh fish and pungent smells of spices, early morning parakeets gossiping in jacaranda trees, sprinkles of a shower giving way to hot sun. Now I try to decipher your writing in the ship's log for words of reassurance. I'm left with sea miles, celestial calculations, course headings for each hour, pencil marks on a chart, a statue of Columbus pointing the way out to sea. Did our happiness rely on a shared restlessness, a search for a haven, a rope ladder for lookout, an escape from an undertow within? I remember the sound of a distant gong, a channel marker, the sudden avoidance of a freighter laden with cargo, swinging dangerously in a heavy swell. In your company there was always safety. In pitch darkness, the sea, a dreaming mind, a soothing voice, by day a mirror, a window, a keeper of worlds loved and lost, working their way to the surface with yearning and sorrow.
Next is Nora Hughes, a poet I first came across through her prize-winning pamphlet Under Divis Mountain. Like me, Nora grew up in Belfast. Here are her 3 poems.
Into the icy hall I see her go, past the waiting phone, to the room where flames sputter on the walls, shiny with new paint for his return. Light bends around a tin teapot, along the arc of liquid poured from its spout in the morning. On a screen in the corner, reindeers step into shadow, stretch out their long faces. She's hungry for the blue light of evening in the north, where you know the world is somewhere, something you've been missing all along. Muffled sounds reach her, the dull horn of Blackstaff Mill, summoning the early shift. A radio, a neighbour's voice. Ahead now among the crowd of spinners, weavers, stitchers, doffers, gathered at the mill door, her friends waving and calling, and the hot life sparks up again between them. This next poem features a street in Belfast with a view of Divis Mountain, iced buns known as donkey's lugs or donkey's ears, and a medical procedure in which a brain is x-rayed. Topography of a brain. Someone is here with me in the house. I am held in a field of vision, the room irradiated, outside and inside, as in a Bonnard painting. Looking up from my book, I see Heidi drinking her morning milk, her grandfather at the window keeping watch as she runs with the goats on the mountain. When bleeding began, I was puzzled, the way we are often left bewildered, with no view other than what pain or its absence can tell us, or an ultraviolet beam, or a memory such as Joe the bread server reaching into his van with a grappling pole to hook a bap for me, Divis dark and low at the end of the street. My brain in full view now, closer than we've ever been. The mountain has come into the room, the line between skin and air permeable, and the future moves towards me, and the past comes back to me. A small baker's van, full row on row of loaves, buns, baps, donkey's lugs. Joe is flowery, motherly, a warm thing that settles in my brain, and if ever my old fear gets hold of me, I'm alone, no mother, no father, Divis unmoved. I'll summon that figment, Joe and his bread van, on a sunny morning. The Visit. Sometimes you arrive the way night falls into the long summer day. Its slow, headlong descent through the pores of evening to where the heart holds on tight, holds its hunger tight. But the heart too is porous, and in no time I'm awash.
And now, Joe Roach, a poet from London, who gives us 2 poems.
I brush my hair and find feathers in the shadow below my ear, downy ones that pass for fluff. No comment from the family when I tweet, do you ever feel like perching on the backs of your chairs, scattering knives and forks, eating straight off the table? I avoid the cat, keep my feet together, hop downstairs, chirrup along to the radio, twitch my head towards the window, open my mouth to sing. Blue and yellow notes flutter out. Notes I repeat, long-tailed feather notes. Arms spread, long strides, faster, running, until I soar over Mrs. Draper's washing line, next door's roof, the council yard wall, over the paddling pool, the aviary, the deer enclosure in Clissold Park, over a bus in Green Lanes. Glide through the alleyway into Kelross Road, swoosh down behind the first plane tree, walk the rest of the way to the school gate just before the bell rings. Years later, my mum said she always knew it was her girl, the small, faraway black V in the sky. Common blue damselfly. I spent only a short time in my teneral stage of pinkish-brown softness, before the skin split down my back, paired wings unfold, my abdomen hardens, dark water tantalizes, and I fly just above the deep, becoming brilliant sky blue, ready for the mating wheel. I bend my body to his, but I give birth alone, too exhausted to surface again. In the textbook, he drops down to rescue me.
Trish Broomfield is no stranger to poetry worth hearing. Here she is with 2 poems.
The idea for this next poem came from Bob Pallister, a fellow poet. He had read Browning's Love Among the Ruins, which alternates a line of 11 syllables with one of 3. I thought I would try it, misread the instructions, and this is bread, 11 syllables and 2 syllables. I weigh the flour out, delicate, white and fine. Lights shine. Yeast is close with sugar, salt its deadly foe. Cheeks glow. Olive oil coats the spoon, then lost in flour's sift. Thoughts drift. Tepid water measured well, stirs in daydreams, sun streams. Careful fingers gently gather up the dough, so slow. Such disparate ingredients holding hands. Time stands. Rolling the dough onto the floured table, able. My movements automatic, smoothing, kneading. Cover up my work and leave it warm to rise. Cut ties. In an hour, more kneading to lock out the air. Prepare. Watching my mother's hands moulding in her love, above. I know that when I'm baking bread, she is here, so dear. Tents and toilets. Let's get away. Peace and calm, watch the sunset, Pam said. We'll pitch the tent opposite the Cern Giant. He's naked and has the most enormous, you know. Oh, great. I didn't think of the practicalities. Our tent, tall on tough grass, was Pam's dad's, blue and dome-like. The sun shone on the white giant, glinting off, you know. We boiled water in a pan on a fragile stove. Tea and cake we brought, the rest we bought, searching a corner shop for sausages. Cider seemed a thing, and fish and chips. The chips scoffed by the time he returned. The Cern Giant misted, the sun setting slowly in summer sloth. The August heat sank, replaced by damp. Cider, sweet, found us chilled, toilet a necessity. Black skies gave us no guide. Take a torch, Pam said. In the toilet tent, hands full of zips and things, the torch dropped to the grass. Beam up, highlighting for all to see. A shadow show of me.
And lastly, an interview with Stephen Paul Wren. Stephen is a chemist by training and profession, and a poet by inclination. For many years he's been wondering how science and poetry can come together. Here he talks about his experience with SciPo, a project which originated in St Hilda's College, Oxford, and which sought to bring poetry and science together through conferences and printed anthologies. He goes on to talk about his own rapidly growing online group, Molecules Unlimited, which is trying to carry on from where SciPo left off. In addition, he reads some poems which he treasures or which have inspired him, and finally he gives us 4 poems of his own. More about Stephen and the poets he talks about can be found on poetryworthhearing.biz.
I guess at school I was always captivated by chemistry in particular, but all the sciences really. Chemistry was my best subject, but I always had a love of language as well. And I wish I could have taken English A-level at the same time. I was very science focused at that stage, but at school I loved creative writing, and I was introduced to Ray Bradbury, the poems of Ted Hughes, Plath, Seamus Heaney, and I've always liked John Milton. But I became a chemistry student. I got more interested in the development of novel therapeutic agents, medicines, and chemistry of the natural world when I was at Cambridge, and actually comparing naturally occurring structures and how they're biosynthesized with how a chemist could make them in the lab, and which is more efficient and so on. And really, we don't compare to nature. Nature is the best chemist. And that really interested me. And even from those days till now, I've been wrestling with how we can describe what we observe in the natural world. And I think you can do it using technical information with science and chemical language. But I feel that to really fully capture what we see and experience, we need poetry as well. And so I've been very interested in that, and then trying to combine the two. And I think when you combine the two, you arrive at almost a new discipline, and that's what I'm exploring now. And you get very wonderful results. I spent a lot of time in the pharmaceutical industry, and there I was honing my knowledge of how medicines are created and the challenges that we face in that process, thinking about how molecules interact with biological receptors, for example. I then started to really want to explore my own research. And so I left the pharmaceutical industry after about 15, 16 years. And I went back to academia, went to Oxford to pursue my own research. And I like the freedom of doing that. And when I was there, I actually met Sarah Watkinson. I was a fellow of St Hilda's. And it was really exciting because she was also a scientist poet. And we worked together on a few SciPo meetings with Jenny Lewis and Elsa Hammond, with a lot of support from our vice principal, Georgina Poole, who was very into interdisciplinary discussions. And that was wonderful. I helped organize various events, and we had some wonderful speakers and open mic poets. And I could sense something was really building, this thirst to try and combine art and science. After a few years, SciPo kind of came to a natural conclusion, really. But Sarah and Jenny were both very keen for me to take the baton on, really, if you like. That's where really Molecules Unlimited came from. I set up a Facebook group, which is really growing very rapidly. There's over 200 members. And we share poems, and the members are scientists and really, really well-known poets. We explore this blend of the chemical sciences and poetry. I run online regular events, which are now quarterly. My mentor is actually Philip Gross, and he's very kindly offered to be the guest reader at the next meeting in April. I think he's done that partly to help me get support and funding to really take this venture to the next level. Really, it's as wide as the chemical sciences reach, and that has a very wide appeal. Almost everything we see and experience impinges on the chemical sciences. But I try to include some kind of molecular content somewhere in the contributor poems, even if it's just a name of a compound. And often the poets then ask me for advice about the nature of those materials, and that can often then lead to a new poem or a collaboration. It's really a group designed to forge collaborations, because I think scientists can learn from poets, and poets they often tell me they would like to know a little bit more about the science. And there's always this debate about how technical you go in the poems. But you also don't have to understand everything, I think, about the science. I would encourage anyone just to have a go, maybe talk to a scientist. I've certainly found, and lots of others have found, that once you start, the poem can come alive, and you end up somewhere really quite unexpected sometimes. I remember a comment from Adam Horowitz once when I read one of my poems. He said, yeah, the technical language sounded like a music of its own. And it's almost, a whole new vocabulary that we have access to, which is exciting. The challenge as a scientist is to, if you like, reduce down that technical content without detracting from what you're trying to say. It can become a challenge sometimes to fit those technical words into a certain, if you like, template of a poem, if you are following a particular meter or form. And that could be quite an exciting challenge as well. my ultimate aim is actually to use poetry to assist the teaching of chemistry. I think that can really be done, and I'm exploring that with schools and doing my own research on this, because I find chemistry is one of those subjects that a lot of people struggle with at school. I found with preliminary data that you can use poetry to give students an alternative way in, or an alternative way to solve very complex problems. And it's fun. So a good example I found progress here is in understanding how natural compounds are biosynthesized in perhaps a flower or something like that. And this compound could have anti-cancer or some other biological properties of use. And these pathways are often very complicated, but you can use imagery and rhythm and so on to make pictures in your mind, and that simplifies the whole process. And you can encapsulate that into a poem. Philip Gross is someone who I admire because he does talk about science in a very accessible way. I can read In the Light of the Times by Philip Gross. I really love his blend of imagery here and science. In the Light of the Times. As when a low sun undercuts the cloud mass, startling the house fronts opposite too bright against its slate blue grey. Like stage flats, operatic, slightly shuddering. In the light that's no light we can see, infrared that conjures us as heat ghosts, the body's visible unconscious, our pulsing life warmth in the underdark, leaving touch tracks and smears as we fade. In light that's more like darkness, like the shriveling cool gaze of X-rays, staring through the soft and moist, going straight for the nub of us, tissues recomposing, growth, decay. In the light of the facts, in which we ebb and eddy, nodes of data, a digital balance unknown to ourselves. So we troop through the sidelines of plague. Old totem tanzas, look, my lords, the merry, dancing bones. And I'd love to read Mama Amazonica by Pascal Petit. Mama Amazonica. Picture my mother as a baby, afloat on a water lily leaf, a name tag round her wrist, Victoria Amazonica. There are rapids ahead, the doctors call mania. For now all is quiet. She's on a deep sleep cure. A sloth clings to the cecropia tree. A jaguar sniffs the bank. My mother on her green raft, its web of ribs, its underside of spines. I'll sing her a lullaby, tell her how her quilted crib has been known to support a carefully balanced adult. My newborn mama, washed clean by the drugs, a caiman basking beside her. All around her, the other patients snore while her eyes open their mandolas. Now my mother is turning into the flower. She's heating up. By nightfall, her bud opens its petals to release the heady scent of pineapple. How the jungle stories stir in the breeze from the window behind her. She hears the first roar of the howler monkey, then the harpy eagle swoop, the crash through galleries of leaves, the sudden snatch, then the silence in the troop. and still she leaps up in her green nightie and fumbles to make tea, slopping the cup over her bed like the Queen of Rain. See her change from nightclub singer to giant bloom in the glow of the nightlight, a mezzo-soprano under the red moon. She's drawing the night flying scarabs into the crucible of her mind. Over and over they land and burrow into her lace. By dawn, she closes her petals. All the next day, the beetles stay inside her. The males mount the females, their claws hooked round forewings. There is pollen to feed on, no need to leave their pension. Night after night, my mother replays this, how the white lily of her youth let that scarab of a man scuttle into her floral chamber before she could cry no. She flushes a deep carmine, too dirty to get up, and her face releases them. The petals of her cheeks spring open. Black beetles crawl out, up the ward walls. I feel with Pascal's work, I just feel like I'm in a completely different world. It's amazing. And it feels like everything's alive around you. My own work, again, touches on nature and the chemical sciences, really, and biology and natural medicines. I also write about people a lot. I do write some eco-poetry. So the first one is called Backbone, and it was published in Marble broadsheet. They had an issue that was themed as the body, and actually that's the same theme for my new Molecules Unlimited meeting coming up in April. This poem describes like a natural remedy for women who are about to give birth. Backbone. My Möbius backbone opened in medicinal tea, served in African cups, a star role in a relief play. My body itself grows in olden Landia plant wombs. Women in the Congo drink, and as I stretch, their childbirth eases. Their contractions rend the still air a little less. This is me impacting other wombs that are not like mine. This is me. The doctors reserve me in their back pockets. They bring me out when signs of distress emerge like balefires. Another poem I wrote appeared in 14 magazine, so I thank Richard Skinner for this, and it describes, again, a potential health remedy, and there's some crossover with spirituality as well. Some of my poems do touch on faith. This is called Chaparrals of Evergreen. In chaparrals of evergreen, irrigated by comprehension's channel, holly leaf cherry tooth leaves shone their light on all the methodology for saving lives. White flowers were medical symbols for the sick. Their colour was near bleakness compared to purple-black fruit. That flesh was kindness of the spontaneous sort. The best sort? The permanence of such shrubbery reflected the preserving of souls, salvation with steadfast souls. This third poem is called Clearings in the Wood, and it appeared in Lothlorien Poetry Journal. Clearings in the Wood. It was our cosmos, a sleek sphere with walls that rebounded news and cropped dark matter. We sauntered around in a light darkness. It was our fledgling life. Bodies were ice and dust. Close family was rock. The unknowns were planets. The space made us feel strong. Clearings in the wood. A pinpoint sun shone to convert the frost and warm up the lake. Cores of friendly stars lit up precincts with the tint of fusion. It was butter-coloured. Eyelids were our lipids. Tangles grew in waters. The echoes assembled us. We became faultless. On, brief candle. Our nature crumbled in a sudden acceleration of carelessness. Each hefty pillar fell, one by one, into substances with muzzles, down the throat of nobility. Our sad limbs and bodies were pulled into wire. There were no more clearings in the wood. We became another blemish in the chaos. Offspring turned off torches. Missile fire reclaimed the cosmos. It drew breath. Diaphragm upon diaphragm began to build alliances. We were submerged. Rivers of life flowed through new clearings in the wood. The symbiosis made us joyous. New hair sprouted and new lips kissed. We became responsible. And I have another poem that appeared in Tears on the Fence called The Stagnosomes. And here I had fun because I invented a new word. The stagnosome came from the suffix some, which corresponds to a word forming element, meaning the body. You know, it's modern Latin from Greek, soma, the body. And I used the prefix stagna to refer to the notion of stagnation. The inflammasomes in biology are examples of this type of word, and they actually refer to the innate immune system, the receptors and sensors. So this new word, stagnosome, was inspired by science. The poem was really written about, I think, certain sections of society that are often overlooked. The stagnosomes. Hitting glass ceilings made of granite, digesting books without reading them. The men and women of sacrifice hold their heads up below parapets. Thinking life does not flow easily. I feel their spirits as they flatten behind imperceptible glassware that shimmers between the morning light and the air they breathe, the air that flows. Their slow growth is a cutthroat mirage. They cannot recognize my pitches. I am shouting, refracting, squeezing milliliters of old wisdom light into the open boats of my dreams. Throw off your yokes, rip out stagnosomes, the organs that crush, rotting your life. Ointments of myth wet into treatments. Rub them onto your eyes. They can cure your blindness. Stamp on the stagnosomes. Feeling alive because of new blood, reading books and understanding them. The men and women of sacrifice gaze ahead and do not miss a thing.
That's all for episode 12. Episode 13 will focus on form and will feature Mimi Calvati and Claire Cox, as well as a host of other poets who have read a poem and explained how that poem came to have its form. If you would like to be one of them, send a recording of your poem, published or unpublished, together with an explanation of how you arrived at its form. Recordings should be no more than 4 minutes and should reach me at poetryworthhearing@gmail.com by the 12th of March. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this episode, and let me remind you that details about the poets and texts of new poems can be found at poetryworthhearing.biz.